Hikamanu wasanya kanu mainde yakuwa no mayaye. Hima usani taikuma epoma indo Yesu. Hima ikaisha nyana ukamaine uanaine. Ikaisha yumadu wakeyo mwane mwe. Ikaisha yumadu wane umawenu menu. Inaisenu menwa manusana yo. Iaikeo manwo. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Earth Warrior Rising. Ignite spirit within and embody the new paradigm of self-mastery. I'm your host, Lotus Guy, and I'm truly excited for this conversation I'm about to have with Ron Stotts. Ron is a transformational leadership guide. Let me try it again. Transformational leadership guide. And I think he's so much more than that. I think in many ways he's preparing the future leaders of tomorrow. I think in many ways he's also very shamanic and just a really pure soul and deeply caring. And I think I'm really excited for this conversation, especially with people who have done this for a while. And so Ron Stotts, welcome, welcome, welcome. So excited to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. And love your voice. It's wonderful how it resonated with the different chakras and brought up the energy. And it reminded me, part of it was when I chant Shring, the Lakshmi chant, it brought in that same energy. So it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So Ron, to those who have yet to know more of who you are and your service in the world, please share it with the audience today.
What I do is really, I find myself guiding entrepreneurs and execs through significant personal transformational experiences, inner experiences that help them create significant and successful organizations, but while creating a more conscious and caring world, which is really the key part of that.
So important. It's so important, you know? I'm really curious about your journey to doing this work. Yeah, I'm curious about like what led you, what was the moments or the events that led you to saying, I really get to work with leaders and really help them transform and channel that into creating a more conscious and caring world.
Well, much of my younger years, 20s, 30s, even 40s, were focused primarily on spiritual and personal growth, and worked with thousands of people throughout the country and Europe too. And I had a great time. That was my tribe. That was my family. And but as I continued to evolve, spirituality has become in America. It's really our new church's business. And I just really had to look at that and embrace that in some ways, because where before I looked at shifting society, shifting individuals, now it's really, we're so influenced by business that I feel like we really need to make an impact there. And I think it was when I was finishing my first book, my publisher really recommended that I take a look at leadership. And what I saw, and what is really truly pointing out, was that I have these very unique skills to take people into the highest levels of leadership. And in studying that more, I started realizing, oh, the highest level, more conscious leaders are really just more conscious. That's all they are. And that's, of course, what I've spent my entire life doing, is guiding people into higher levels of consciousness. So it was really a matter of just shifting the perspective and of where they're going to go with that consciousness. And so a lot of my work is about really integrating and accessing whole brain thinking, and really ultimately accessing what I call big mind, universal intelligence, because as a leader, you have to be very agile. You have to be able to handle all the increased complexity and rapid change in today's market. And they can only do that with a very quiet, centered, conscious mind. And so the other research that really probably grabbed me more than anything is that it's only the highest level leaders who can create a significant lasting change on a societal level. And it's kind of like well, if I'm really going to make an impact in the world, then I really need to be either drawing people into those higher levels or supporting people in using that higher consciousness to create a more conscious and caring world. And so, it's kind of strange to think that, coming from my unique background, that leadership would be where I landed, but I recognize that, if you say you've climbed the corporate ladder or you've been a successful entrepreneur, they don't have the skills that I have. They don't have that unique, significant personal transformational experiences that I've spent my entire life going through and supporting and guiding others through. And they also have very noisy minds, to be quite honest with you. It's all about, wanting things and money and that. And so when they come to me, it's almost like they've reached a ceiling. They've done the best they can with the best that they have. And they're very, very successful. I mean, they're making millions, sometimes billions of dollars. But they always run into a ceiling that's limited by the lack of depth that they've gone within themselves. And so that's really my work, is taking them deeper so they can reach higher, so they can have a greater influence that supports a more conscious and caring world.
This is awesome. This is exactly the work that I'm super passionate about. This is exactly what I believe as well. So it's so beautiful. Um, I'm really curious around this because I've been lucky enough to have conscious leaders, like C-suite leaders, come and work with me. They've already been, I guess you can say, maybe they're younger, and they've already, I guess, maybe have been closetedly spiritual, and that's great. I can work with that, the closetedly spiritual, like C-suite leader, entrepreneur, like this is amazing, because I think deep in their hearts they know that they can't fool themselves, that deep in their hearts they know that they want freedom. I'm really curious around if you've ever experienced leaders that find this work maybe unimportant or maybe not understand it, even the word consciousness, they're like, raising consciousness, how is that going to help improve my company's bottom line? Do you find that people come to you already somewhat curious spiritually, or like, did you find that you'd have to enroll them into the idea that consciousness, personal transformation, connection to source, big mind, those things are so important if they truly want to elevate their own leadership?
Yeah. Well, certainly my earlier decades of experience were much more parallel to yours, but in the last decade or so, yeah, they come to me usually out of desperation, out of recommendation, out of things aren't working, and it's very frustrating for them. And no, they don't necessarily have a spiritual background or even an awareness of it in any form. But what I find, and I have to admit, I'm thinking of a particular guy, and I was going, wow, this is, and his almost one of his first sentences was, and this love stuff, I don't get it. I don't love myself, and I'm doing fine.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
No, but yeah, I think, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
there are many ways people call this, but there are some leaders, individuals, people of power who are truly possessed by something
Yeah.
and a form of thinking, and they bought into it in such a strong way. I mean, when I'm thinking of some leaders, I'm like, whoa, that run the world, I'm like, this is not conscious, and so I'm just really curious about the process of you supporting them in that breakthrough,
Yeah.
when there could be ego involved, thinking that things are fine, and I don't love myself and I'm doing fine, it's just
and who are you to tell me that I'm not? Yeah, what's so rewarding, it really is, because these people I my first I have a 2-month program that I really creates a foundation for all of the other development that we go through. But I take them into their life. I take them into their history. I take them into their experiences of growing up. And they, of course, realize all the different parts of themselves that they've left behind to be accepted or successful
Mm,
or
mm,
to get by in the world. In other words, I
mm,
introduce them to their program for getting love. That's all about looking outside of yourself for that love and acceptance.
mm.
And as they understand that, because they're kind of
Yeah. You're like,
they
don't look at that.
yeah, all right. And I've
What
got
are you getting at?
got a lot of arm around that. How
Yeah.
can you even see that?
Yeah.
But as they begin to shed that armor, as they begin to understand that what's protected their heart is now killing them, quite literally, they
Mm,
begin to understand that that their acceptance of those different parts are really ways of accessing the very parts that they need to move their life into a higher level of leadership, success, consciousness, everything. And they begin to see the connection between all those. But
mm,
the most lovely thing is that they fall in love with themselves.
mm,
And when they fall in love with themselves, their mind gets quieter because they've healed all the noise stuff that's creating the noise. Their mind gets more focused. It begins to start integrating. They begin to think in new ways. They access levels of creativity, intuition, and imagination that
mm,
they've never had before.
mhm,
Just as my earlier in my life students, as they became more conscious. Initially, it's about us, that personal journey. But then it becomes about, well, it's really about how can I help others? How can I help the world? How can I connect with the universe? How can I be one with God? And it's that journey that I take these business execs and really very successful people on. And they fall in love with themselves. They begin to restructure their businesses and they become a better leader that's more compassionate and caring and collaborative and really wanting to support everybody else in the organization. They might have a widget that's all about making money for them. Well, they begin to go, well, how can I use that in society to enhance society and make it a more
mm,
caring, loving world?
mm.
And they're brilliant people. So it's really just a little
Yeah.
tweak in terms of their focus. And especially towards the end because for me, it's all about quieting your mind. The more quiet your mind is, the more conscious you are. It's just,
Yeah.
so in the brain, literally, as your brain gets quieter neurologically, your forebrain begins to blossom, which gives you an entirely new level of access to your own intelligence and capabilities. And you begin to go beyond what I call local mind into big mind.
Mm,
And, so they ultimately end up learning to just sit when a problem comes up, they just sit quietly, focus on what they want, and trust the universe to bring them that information. And when they begin to experience they begin to see that, oh, I'm not just a separate wave on the ocean. I am the ocean, and I have access, an integrated life with that ocean of consciousness. And they they just become kinder, more loving. This one woman who had recommended this one fellow, she's a sweetie. I mean, she's just a new age hippie chick that I've known for a long time.
yeah.
Just an absolute sweetheart. And she had left this fellow and just said, I can't do this. Within a couple of months, he had changed so dramatically. And this is a woman in integrity and her power. He had changed so dramatically that she not only came back, they got married within a couple of months. And
Mm.
so that's how deep the transformation can be and how quick. So, yeah.
So beautiful. I love what you're sharing. What I'm tuning into is the thing that I've received. So hearing it echo it back to me is so powerful.
Yeah.
The idea that we are very much channels for source.
Yeah.
We are conduits for source, for universal cosmic intelligence, energy, God, goddess, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that when we are able to attune our beings to this energy,
Yeah.
and not only to this energy, but from a space of heart, from a space of love. We're clear channels for that. And we can create worlds through this power that creates worlds.
Mm,
The thing that you called big mind, the higher consciousness.
mm.
Uh, and then from that channel, like that's where solutions, ideas, visions, creative approaches come in beyond what the ego could even conjure up, you know. And it's about doing the work to be that clear temple for that. But not only that, I think the work is twofold, like you shared. It is very much about personal transformation as well. uh, the way that we relate to ourselves, the way that we relate to others, relate to life, to get into the space of love and access greater authenticity within oneself. Because I think when we I've always truly believed that source, God, goddess, big mind, universe, or whatever, it is within us, you know? And so through the access of self love, we're more intimate with that divine force. And by being more intimate with that, we can really co create with that. And so it does take a little bit of questioning what is truly guiding us. You mentioned the leadership crisis prior to this interview starting, but like, what is truly guiding us? What is truly motivating us? And is that truly what is fulfilling? Or is there really something else that's actually calling forth greater authenticity and true bliss that cannot be bought, you know, bliss that never loses its value.
Isn't that little blue pill, won't that? No.
You know, that bliss. um, but yeah, and allowing that to be accessed and to be expressed, I think is so important. Um, and a transformation that happens not just in one's business, but in one's life as well.
It's a
And so
great
it's really
mission.
creating greater harmony within, so these people can generate it
Yeah.
in every aspect of their lives, and especially if they're highly influential or lead others, it can ripple effect. So I love just how important spirituality and consciousness is in leadership. Um,
Critical. Yeah.
it's so important. So thank you for sharing that. You talked about the leadership crisis. You even mentioned something around transactional to transformational business. I'd love to hear, what your perspective on a leadership crisis that's coming out today.
Well, it's multiple folds to it. I mean, research shows that top CEOs around the world have no confidence they can handle the rapid change and increased complexity in the business world of today. And it also shows that only about 1% of leaders are conscious enough to create a significant positive social change. So it's no wonder that our systems, education, health, environment are all failing.
Mm.
The truth is we can't afford to just keep letting this happen. And so, we have to shift our whole paradigm of leadership to one that's, right now it's more from a scarcity fear model that the world is happening to me, rather than a one that's more abundant conscious model of that the world is happening through me. And so that's the transformation, is to really bring people into an awareness of their connection with the totality, to whatever level they're willing to go within any given session or grouping and program. But yeah, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I would even perhaps plus it a bit by saying we're not channeling anything other than us. We
Mm.
are all of that.
Mm. Mm.
When you've dissolved in the infinite enough and
Mm.
become one with God often enough, you realize that all you're really doing is connecting with more of who and what you are. It has nothing to do with this human being in this,
Mm.
skin sack. It's got more to do with the energy, the consciousness that you are within that greater consciousness.
Mm.
And so, it's life isn't about going from this comfort zone to that one in these kind of stutter and starts that are so fear-based. It's really about getting to a place where you surrender and you're evolving on an ongoing basis. And of course, you have to be breathing, you have to be letting go. And that's to me what the journey is all about, is breathing and letting go, and breathing and becoming. And what you're letting go of is all that keeps you from being your authentic, whole, unconditionally loving self. And becoming, yes, you become aware of this, and this is authentic, and this is cool. But then you become aware of the connection with someone as lovely and wonderful as you. And then you create relationships where that self-love is then mirrored in your relationships with them. And then it becomes just bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon you find yourself dedicating to supporting a conscious and caring world.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. That essentially is what I mean around self-love and accessing God within self, or God as self. Uh, and like, there is that distinction around expansion and evolution rather than up leveling. And so that's really beautiful, really beautiful picture. The interesting thing around the leadership crisis is that scarcity fear model that you shared. The world is happening to me. It becomes reactive. It becomes survival. It becomes kind of dog eat dog, versus the world is happening through me. And so often, uh, those individuals who do want to expand consciousness, they want to serve at a higher level. They want to deepen and transform the way that they lead and shift life. And like, what I see often is kind of the jadedness that has sunken in, right? That even though they want to create the shifts that they want to create, they feel, I guess, stuck or trapped in the model they're in. I mean, I think a good example are like politicians. They're you know puppeted by their lobbyists and their donors and all that, and they have to play this game in order to get their higher agenda, higher purpose out. They got to compromise, so they have this feeling around feeling trapped within the system. So again, from the scarcity fear model, like, even though their ego, or they're listing this evidence that they may be trapped in the way that they want to carry something out and have to shift, they have that desire. They have well-meaning desires to serve. So what would you share to those who feel like, well, I'm here in this situation and this is just how it is, and I just have to play this game in this way?
Well, clearly your level of consciousness determines how you see and react to everything that comes into your life. So you're making choices and creating your life out of a particular level of consciousness that you call your comfort zone, you call your personality, your characteristics. So it's a bold move to really explore, well, who am I really? What am I really capable of? It's really bold to recognize that, with experience, you can breathe yourself into any level of consciousness you want. You can go into the hell world. You can go into, a oneness with God just by breathing, being breathed, becoming the breath, and dissolving. And so it's a matter of, if you're stepping into politics, you're stepping into a cage, a limiting cage. You're not going to go into politics and change it, that paradigm. It's kind of like, so there's something I call the big game, where there's a persecutor, victim, and rescuer. And it's a way of guaranteeing that you'll get limited unconditional love. And so most people play that game. That's why I call it the big game. But it takes a bit of courage or disenchantment with the game to really be willing to love yourself enough so that you're not willing to play any one of those roles, so that you're really focused on stepping up your game and being with people who are willing to step into the fire together, if you will, willing to really unpack their bags together and grow together, rather than, in that other game, say you're the rescuer, which somebody might go into politics to be a rescuer. Well, you can't be a rescuer unless you have victims. So you're really never rescuing, you're just shifting things around so that it looks better and you feel better and they love you and you love them. You get voted in again. But, if you're really going to change the world, then you have to raise your consciousness. Then you have to become that higher level leader. And that higher level leader is going to step up and create an entirely new game that, it isn't called politics any longer. I'm not sure what the name of it would be, but it's definitely something that's available. Maybe that's what I do. I don't know. For me to step into politics would be, I'd have to contract my consciousness down just to survive in that environment. You understand what I'm saying? And so if you want to make a change in the world, if you want to make a change in your life, the most important and maybe the only thing you can possibly do to really accomplish that is to raise your level of consciousness, which means you have to let go of anything that keeps you from being that conscious and accept everything that does support you in that. And I'm tempted to go off on a tangent, but it is relevant, and that is, we think of a coherent mind. We think of a light bulb and it just throws light up everywhere. That's most people's mind. But you think of a laser beam, and that's really all the light beams, all the thoughts, all the movement within the mind moving in the same direction. And so, to be able to do that, you have to heal the past, because that's where 90% of your brain is, being affected by all that emotional backlog. And so, but if you don't develop that coherent mind, you are really decreasing your mind's ability to think by 70%. You literally, stress draws about 70% of the blood from the cortex, so that you just aren't thinking as well. Chemical gates shut down in the brain and you're just not thinking as well. So to really have a coherent, integrated whole brain thinking, you have to quiet the mind. You have to heal the past. You have to be breathing. And so, what comes up for me is, if somebody really wants to serve the world, they have to fall in love with themselves. They have to quiet their mind. They have to develop the mind and become more conscious. And it's that letting go process that most people are scared to death of. Because, it's like, I have an exercise, I call it the 5 something process. I can't remember what it is. But, where you sit each morning and you say, you invite a part of you to come forward that you're unfamiliar with. And that part comes forward and you ask, well, how did you get separate? And you're typing out the responses. And then you go, well, what do you need to be healed and to become an integrated part of this being again? But it's the last question is the key one. It's like, who would you like us to become? In other words, this part that you're reintegrating in, who would you like us to become? In other words, I'm willing to let go of this role of leading this being this personality, and become something different, become something more. I'm willing to take you in and access that part. And that's the part that's absolutely terrifying to most people. And I understand that. I mean, I've gone through my moments of transition and transformation where I felt like I was going to die. And of course, I was reborn. and it doesn't have to be that terrifying. Maybe that's why my work is so successful, is I've figured out how to do it in a smooth, comfortable, transformational way that's palatable to people. But yeah, did I answer your question? I felt like
You
I
did. I mean, it's so powerful, because I think ultimately it's around like the letting go process and the reintegration of the parts that we've left behind to be in this game.
well,
And it really is like the willingness to let go of who you think you needed to be and what game you think you needed to play for something even much more rewarding. And in some ways, it is like a shamanic death, especially if one has wrapped their whole identity around the thing that they were doing or have been doing for so long. And so it's a powerful process. And what I keep hearing from you is about self love and working with the mind. I'd love to hear around your, I don't know about process of self love. I see the process to be very common or similar around everyone's, around across the board, which is very much around processing the events that cause us to leave ourselves or abandon ourselves, the definitions we put on ourselves because of certain experiences, and then kind of coming to a place of forgiveness, compassion, understanding, and reclamation within oneself, and then the commitment to be kind to oneself, to honor oneself. I'm really curious around the whole brain thinking and the accessing of the big mind. So, like, is this really around mindfulness, meditation, and breathing? Is there a process or system that you specifically work with?
Well, in the initial system of that, I certainly agree. A lot of people follow common threads. So it really comes down to, I think, in terms of my work, at least what I've been told is the difference. The key difference is really the ease that I do that with people, but also the depth that I take people to, because you can only go as deep with others as you've gone with yourself. And since I seem to be addicted to going deep and wide and up and out for my entire life, I'm not ever going to run into thinking something that makes me like, oh, well, I don't want to go there. That feels unsafe and uncomfortable. So yeah, it is then a matter of, I don't want to ride on that, but that's such a crucial piece. If you don't heal the past, you just can't go into the levels that you're talking about. So let's just, okay, that's your foundation. Most people build their life on a very flimsy or sandy foundation. So I watch it collapse frequently, and that's oftentimes when they come to me. But we're creating a solid foundation that you can build any structure on, any life on. And that structure is really built on developing a quieter mind, a more coherent mind. You know, being a neurologist, I don't want to get too techie, but, quite literally what I'm doing is creating an entirely new operating system and then installing the new software for success in their brain. I mean, that's quite literally what's happening. We talk about mindfulness, we talk about meditation and things, but when you really understand what's going on a technical basis, it's pretty exciting because what's going on is every thought you have creates a neurological pattern. So every new thought you have, if it's more positive, more mindful, you're more aware of what you're thinking, feeling, and your level of consciousness, for example, that creates those new pathways. And as those new pathways develop, that's your brain begins to work together. Your right brain sees the bigger picture. Your left brain sees the linear optimal path to getting to your higher attention. And that's all very exciting for most people because people come to me are very smart, but they always at some point say, I'm feeling smarter. And that's because they are. But what's really wonderful is the mind gets to a certain place of quiet and integrative wholeness and focus on higher intention, that the forebrain begins to go, oh, it's safe for me to come out. And the forebrain is really built, constructed as a part of us to be our CEO, our leader, our guide, because it's got a much bigger picture. It's not only dealing with what's best for us, it's what's better for everybody. And as that forebrain begins to develop, you gain that access to what I call, it's not really big mind at that point, but it's greater mind. It's not just that small-minded thinking. But as you get quieter and you begin to trust the process of life, you begin to see that everything that's coming into your life is really a perfectly designed gift to serve you, to open up your heart and love more fully. You begin to trust that everything that comes into your life is not something to be feared or guarded against or defended and filtered. It's something to breathe into and accept, because you realize the universe really is perfect. And as you get to that place, then you can get quiet enough to, for example, one of my clients found out that I create Japanese gardens. And so he was, I got to get one for my wife for her birthday or something like that. And of course, he wanted to spend $1 million, which was a little overwhelming for me. But, I found myself, I was living in Mill Valley and lived up in the Redwoods. And I just went up on a little old wooden bench that I'd built out of driftwood and sat there and said, okay, this is the impact I want to have on these people's lives. This is what I'm creating. Let me have that vision so that I can best serve these people. And as I sat there for the next hour or two, I watched that image come in of the garden, the 50 by 60 pond with the turtle island and the bamboo forest and the 120-foot stream. And then it started detailing out with the plants and the movement and the sounds and the boulders. And by the time it was finished, I hadn't done anything. And I oftentimes, to be quite a little side note, I think I only have one talent, and that is to quiet my mind. Because in doing that, I get access to everything. And that garden, within 3 months, it was constructed and won international awards and all types of things. And so if people really want to have an extraordinarily successful life, if they really want to discover who they are, if they really want to contribute to the world, they have to step out of their limitations and their fears. They have to step into the fullness of who and what they are and the interconnectedness of who and what they are, so they can access that brilliance. I don't think of big mind as it's a thing out there. It's not like, there's a library that little me accesses. No, it's an aspect of myself, an aspect of all of us, all of existence, that we can go into and gain information, solutions, images, whatever we want. And it works. People who know me, and one of my early mentors, Buckminster Fuller, I was on stage with him one night.
Are you serious? You were on a stage with Buckminster Fuller?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You're famous. Oh my God. Buckminster Fuller is amazing. That's so cool. Okay, cool. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but that person is
Bucky
amazing.
and Joseph Campbell were two of my major influences.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, sorry.
Well, Bucky, he was on stage, and I was, I had all these little things that I was helping him build on stage. And in the middle of his talk, and I'm like 27, he's 87, so, all of a sudden he stops and he starts looking upwards. And it's like, and I'm going, a little nervous. And all of a sudden he comes back in and goes on with his talk. And that night we're sitting there having cocoa in front of the fire, which he loved to do. And I kind of boldly or hesitantly asked him, well, what was that? What did you do? And he was fascinated with what I did, which was meditation, quieting the mind and doing all that. He's quite fascinated by that. And he says, well, you go into meditation and quiet your mind, right? And, yeah. And he says, well, when you go into that quiet, if you trust, you can access higher information. And it was the first time I felt so silly, because it was like I had discovered airplanes and I was sitting on the airport, the runway, not flying anywhere, just thinking that was it. And Bucky's going, no, these actually leave the ground and will take you anywhere you want to go. And so, you discover big mind and you get more and more comfortable with it, so you can just access it. And if you're a higher level leader, you need that kind of agility. You need to go, you can't be trying all these dead ends and frustrations and struggles and looking outside of yourself for answers that can only be found within, which is the biggest problem in leadership today. But what happens is you just you just call that in, and it's not only a good thing, it's usually the best idea you could have ever come up with, and you did it effortlessly.
Mm.
You know, I had one guy who was creating something, and he needed a hinge. It was a very, you know, complicated hinge joint for something, modular buildings that he was playing with, and he tried it, and it was like all of a sudden there it was. And he's not an engineer. He's not. It's just a business guy. So it works, and it, you know, not that that's the highest level, but in business, that's a very usable level, and so that's where I aim to take people to. You know, after that, they start going, well, what's the spiritual stuff? And so I take them into Joshua Tree and give them a weekend of a deeper experience for spirituality.
Mm.
Yeah.
So beautiful, Ron. Thank you so much for everything that you're sharing here. It's so inspiring. It's so important. And what I love about it is that you just ground it in with a lot of science, which is beautiful, you know. And it's a it just opens my heart. It just warms my heart to know that there are other individuals who are just equally passionate about this. Impact is so important, especially now in these times. And the more that we can support people who desire to create impact in the world, or who are leading and want to and things aren't working and transform their lives, that they have an understanding of why this work is so important, and that it's not only so important, it's very rewarding. So thank you so much for being here. And I know you also have, for those who are interested in learning more, you also have free gifts. So would love to for you to share them.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm in that's in development is really transformational leadership training, and that's really aimed at younger people who are looking for a path that's not exclusive of life, but inclusive of all aspects of their life, including their spirituality. But it does definitely lead into higher levels of leadership. And so, you know, one way to start that journey is to just go to my website, and there's on the homepage, there's 9 insightful questions. So just go to ronstotts.com and download that for free. And there's a couple of other things that are processes that you can do on your own, but really allow you to get to just a completely different, deeper understanding of what's really going on in your life. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And what do you really, really want? You know, if you don't know your highest intention, you don't have a compass heading. So you don't know whether you've gotten to where you want to be or not. And so, you know, you've got to get things cleared up enough so you at least know where you're going. And then life gets, everything else just comes into alignment with that, and it gets much, much more enjoyable.
So beautiful. Ron, thank you so much. To those who are interested in experiencing these, the link to the free gifts are here on this page. And Ron, thank you so much
Okay.
for just being that you are, your shares, your wisdom, the time and personal healing that you put into doing this work. It's very clear that, you know, that what you're creating comes from just great heart, and it's very beautiful. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on the show, and wishing the best to everybody listening. So thank you.
And I always ask all the experts this one question to end with. And the question is, when I say Earth Warrior Rising, what comes to you?
To be an Earth Warrior, you have to have gotten to a sense of consciousness that the Earth is your home.
Mm.
Earth is your mother. The Earth, you know, the pulsations of the entire planet are in sync with your heart. That's science. That's not metaphysics. You know, you are this Earth. When they talk about us going to other planets, they don't know what they're talking about. We are completely intrinsically an aspect of this planet, and so you have to be that conscious. And a warrior really isn't the warrior of having your blade out. It's a warrior of opening up your heart and loving fully enough, being willing to love yourself and others fully enough to create a home that enhances everybody's lives and keeps Mother Earth in mind.
Mm.
And rising, of course, is just that, in this beautiful embrace that we're in here on the planet Earth with each other. is rising into a level of consciousness that you are unified and at one with everyone. And that will take you to an experience that of oneness with what you might call God, you might call whatever you call it. I can think of a dozen names, but in that trust of that oneness, you really are embraced. You really realize the perfection of life. And your life becomes one of just breathing and feeling gratitude, breathing and learning to love more fully.
Thank you, Ron. Such a beautiful answer.
Mm.
And to all those who are in this session, that is our session. This is Earth Warrior Rising, Ignite Spirit Within, and Embody the New Paradigm of Self-Mastery. I'm your host, Lotus Guy, and I will see you in the next session. Big love.
Bye-bye.